Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about the latest news, information and analysis of what's really going on in Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about the recent NATO summit. And despite all the claims of unity, it seems that all is not well within NATO, and could it split up in the future? Now, the NATO summit in The Hague concluded on Wednesday. However, before it even actually started, there were indications that there was a significant crisis brewing within the world's largest military alliance. Now, analysts are predicting that NATO could eventually break up into several blocs. So in what circumstances would this possibly occur? And what are the alternatives to which NATO is currently confronted with that will prevent this happening? Now, the NATO summit, as I said, took place in The Hague, and the Alliance's Secretary-General, the former Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, called the event historic. He stated that the summit would take bold decisions to strengthen their collective defence, making NATO stronger, fairer and more lethal. Now, I'm sure that comes as a serious comfort to the Serbians, many of which are still suffering from the ill effects of the NATO bombing that took place in their country back in 1979 and the depleted uranium shells that have caused cancers, etc. Now, the summit's agenda did not include anything about accepting the Ukraine into the alliance, and the G.I. Joe fancy dress wearing, draft dodging Kiev cokehead was personally pushed to the sidelines, and that's both literally and figuratively. In the group photo, Zelensky was placed on the periphery of the assembled gathering, plus he was not invited to participate in the most important meetings. In fact, he didn't attend many things. I think he might have got invited to the dinner, but that would be about it. Then in the final declaration, according to the Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó, there are no words about the irreversibility of Ukraine's path to join NATO, which was part of the statement at last year's summit in Washington. Now, according to Mark Rutte, the North Atlantic Alliance will become stronger and more deadly by increasing each country's defence spending to 5% of their annual GDP. That's what Donald Trump is demanding. Anyway, before I continue, I would like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, scobricksinsight.com, and contribute to its further development. Now, you can do this by making a small donation, which is done by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Sometimes it's hidden behind the three dots, so click on the three dots and you'll see a sub-menu and thanks is there. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and do keep the comments coming. Do love to read them and respond. Now, a number of other European countries have expressed a divergent opinion. Now, firstly, it should be noted that Spain has stated that it does not intend to allocate a significant portion of its budget to increase spending on weapons, and it seems to be not alone in that position. Secondly, a few days before the summit, the Italian defence minister, who's one of the key figures in Europe's political landscape, voiced his concerns about the relevance of NATO. Guido Crosetto has stated that the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance is no longer a justifiable reason to exist. Now, this is something that many analysts have commented on over the years, since its main enemy, the Soviet Union, collapsed and NATO's main rival, the Warsaw Pact, was actually dissolved back in 1991. He said that US and Europe were once the centre of the world, but now they have to deal with everything else, and they are not the centre of the world anymore. He says that to often talk as though we were still living 35 years ago in the Cold War, but everything has changed. Subsequently, he clarified that his remarks were not intended to call for the dissolution of NATO. However, many analysts have interpreted these words as just a minor Italian rebellious gesture, not so much against the alliance as being against the new increased spending initiatives of Trump and Rutte. In 2024, Crosetto's Italian's defence expenditure accounted for 1.49% of Italy's GDP, ranking among the lowest in Europe. The Italian defence minister opposes any increase beyond the figure of 2.5%, emphasising that Europe cannot compromise on the well-being of their population or fail to address the pressing social issues. Now, this standpoint is not only shared by Crosetto, but the whole segment of the Italian establishment. He said Italy doesn't feel or experience the same threats as other European countries seem to think they do. Italy does not consider Russia to be a threat and so therefore doesn't wish to increase its defence spending at the expense of social spending and economic growth. So, it's quite well put, and I think I would tend to agree with him, He's certainly got a point. He did say, though, however, this doesn't indicate an imminent rebellion by Italy, nor an organisation of a joint effort with Spain to leave NATO. Now, at present, neither Rome nor Madrid have strong leaders who can indicate to the main European leaders and the rulers in the US who effectively control NATO that they really don't want to go along with the current defence policy. Therefore, Crosetto's words could be considered an indication of the Italian position, especially in a situation where the US demand the law and rarely listen to anybody else's opinion. The US has frequently been accused of ignoring European interests on a number of issues, particularly the Ukrainian crisis and the situation in Iran. So this underscores Europe's call for greater autonomy, according to Dmitry Suslov of the Higher School of Economics. However, Crosetto's statements indicate there is a crisis within NATO, and does it have a strategy to address it? With regard to its fundamental objectives and operational methods of the alliance, not its financial considerations. Crosetto's words do not imply that the situation is hopeless, that NATO should disband. Instead, he thinks it must create new reasons for existence, simply because the old ones are no longer suitable. That's pretty accurate. He said it's imperative that NATO members develop a new strategy on a global scale rather than a North Atlantic Central European one, according to Dmitry Belsky, who's a research fellow at the Russian Foreign Affairs University. Now, after all, he asserts, there are some Europeans that are cognizant of the fact that the Western world is undergoing a serious period of decline in its demographics, plus its economic and military power. Now, NATO has two options for its possible change. Now, the first of these is an integration into the global structures, a process which Crosetto proposes. The Italian minister stated that if NATO was created to guarantee peace and collective security, then the alliance must fulfill these roles together with members of the global south. Well, good luck with that. They've already suffered at the hands of NATO, and I don't think they'd be particularly interested. And he says that would then become a fundamentally different organisation. He said, or it won't be possible to achieve security in a framework of rules that apply to everybody. Now, of course, this option is difficult for the NATO. The alliance can't change due to the nature of its structure. It's an institution that serves to consolidate and uphold American dominance in Europe, while making sure US controls the European security framework, which is why there are so many bases, particularly in Germany, the UK. Just remember, it was set up to keep the Americans in, the Soviets out, and the Germans down. Let's recall, even Turkey was a member of NATO before West Germany was. Plus, NATO as an institution is focused on confrontation. It is not equipped to engage in constructive or diplomatic dialogue. Ultimately, there's no unifying basis between North America and Europe except their shared hatred and opposition to Russia, according to Suslov. Now, as Crosetto suggests, it's not possible for NATO to serve as a channel for cooperation and diplomacy with the global south. It's also not possible to integrate this into a pan-Eurasian system of collective security that Vladimir Putin mentioned back in 2003. So consequently, the alliance is probably going to be unable to adapt to a multipolar world built on cooperation between the regional centres of power and their security architecture. NATO's confrontational approach and its prioritization of military might over that of the characteristics of peace and diplomacy shows that it's just an outlier, and it just basically is carrying on the era of American dominance. I mean, if its integration to more responsive structures is not possible, then only expanding into Asia, but again, that's not really going to happen because that'll lead to an aggression level escalation of conflicts arising in neighbouring countries, just like what happened in Eastern Europe with Russia, despite the absence of rational justifications for such actions. So it's important to note that the initiation of aggression in this region is not only initiated by the US, but by Europe itself. They need a war against Russia to justify their existence and their declining economies. I mean, that's what the Europeans are now focused on, making sure a conflict with Russia happens. They understand that, though, but without the United States and the NATO, which formalizes America's participation in European affairs, they won't be able to challenge and engage in a conflict with Russia. Plus, the economic development model of the formerly affluent European countries is predicated on the extraction of resources from third world countries and bullying them. So in essence, it's a matter of neo-colonialism. NATO countries seek to dominate the global south from a privileged position, just like they did as part of the empire, imposing their values and formats of cooperation, as well as the exploitation of resources of the states they conquer. You only have to look at Iraq for an example of that. Now, the alliance, if it refined its functions after the Soviet bloc and collapsed on the global stage, but it couldn't, of course. So there is no real future for NATO. It's a dinosaur, and it really needs to look at what it's supposed to be doing. As far as increasing the security, it just makes it worse. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.